Hey guys, Brewery 602 Beer Reviews here at Brewery 602 on Instagram. My name is Marcus, and today I'm brewing a beer. So here's another beer brewing episode. I'm going to be actually making my pumpkin empanada ale. So this is going to be a traditional beer for me. Do this, every time, maybe in September, beginning of September, so that way I can enjoy it in October. Anyways, here are my ingredients. I did have them filled in whole and not ground up or not crushed. I like to do that on my own so I could control how fine I actually mill these grains. But these are my ingredients. It's 6 pounds of Maris Otter, a pound of 2-row Breeze 2-row carapils or dextrin, 1/4 pound of Crystal 60, and 5 pounds of Munich. And then I do have a pound of lactose in there as well, and I'll be using Mitterfru as my bittering hops. Anyway, so those are the ingredients there, and these are the pumpkin empanadas I'll be using, and I'll actually cut those up, and those will actually go in the mash, and some more pumpkin puree there I can use. So the first thing I do is actually introduce you to my equipment here real quick. This is my grain mill. Got my 3-tier system here with pumps, my mash tun, which is going to get cleaned out here soon, my vessels, my HLT, my boil kettle, and of course I have my fermenter. And no brew day at my place cannot be complete without cassette tapes. So there you go. So I'm going to jump on to the next step, which is conditioning my grains. And the way I condition my grains is I actually will use a formula here. So as you can see, there's a formula. It's the grain bill times 16 and then multiplied by 0.02, and that'll tell me how much water to use to spray on the grains. So let's do that real quick. So I have 12 1/4 pounds of grains. So I'm going to multiply that by 16, get 196, multiply that by 0.02, and get 3.92, roughly 4 ounces of water. So that's what we'll do. We will get my water here, 0. We'll drop in 3.92 ounces. I could go to 4, it's not a big deal. Alright, that's close enough. So we'll go ahead and condition grains. Alright, so what I do is I dump the grains in a bucket, and so here are my grains, and as I dump I actually hit them with the sprayer, and then when they're in there I can actually spray the grains and then mix them around really nice. Just mix them up really good, and what that is going to do is it's going to get the husk a little moist, and you don't want to go too moist. That's why we have that formula. It'll get it moist enough to where the husk will stay intact whenever I mill my grains, creating a really nice filter. So that's why I condition grains, and I've done it every time and it never fails me. I never have a stuck sparge. So let me continue doing this. I'll let them sit for 10 minutes and then we'll mill grains. This is the milling process. We mill our grains to kind of get the flour substance out of it. What you do is that is the sugars that you're getting. So you got to mill them down. You don't want to go too fine because you could get a stuck sparge. I usually go 0.028, and that's pretty fine, but after conditioning my grains, it makes it that much more efficient. So I'm going to go ahead and mill, and it's really loud, so I'll spare you the noise. These are the milled grains. all done. As you can see, you got that flour type substance, but you also have these husks. And these husks are going to act like a filter and not allow my sparge to get stuck. And I'll talk to you about that when we start getting to the sparge. But yeah, they look fantastic. That's exactly what you want right there. Some people will think it's a little too fine, but again, like I said, with all these husks in there, it's like adding rice hulls to it. You add rice hulls to prevent a stuck sparge, and especially when using pumpkin, because that will stick a sparge really easily. So I'm really happy with that, and I'm gonna move on to mashing. Hey, so real quickly, the way I prepare my water is I actually run my water through a filter, and that'll filter out all the chlorine. And right now is perfect time for this type of beer to use just my regular tap water filtered. It's actually set up perfectly for this type of beer. Normally if I do like a hazy or a pilsner or something to that effect, you want to use you know, a reverse osmosis water and build your own water profile. But in this case, stouts and dark beers are perfect for this time of year with this water. So anyway, just thought you'd like to check that out. All right, got my temperature up in my HLT, my hot liquor tank. Got it up to 170. Typically that gets me to about 152 whenever I mash in. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my hot liquor, and I'm going to do 4 gallons of hot liquor. And the way I calculate that is I take the amount of grains in pounds, multiply it by 1.25, and then divide it by 4. And that gives me how many gallons I'm going to use, which is 4 gallons for this particular one. You could do like 1.5 divided by 1.5, or you know, less, or 1.0. Depends on how thick you want your mash. I figured 1.25. I've used it for a long time, and it tends to work really well for me. I did add some brewing salts in there and added some pH stabilizer. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this to 4 gallons, and then we'll mash it. All right, so I added my grains, and now we're making our mash. As you can see, it's got a good thickness to it. You want it to be about the thickness of porridge or oatmeal, something to that effect. So as you can see, it's really nice, and the smell is absolutely fantastic. Next step here is going to be add my pumpkin. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss in my pumpkin. Went ahead and cut up the pumpkin empanadas. So you see all that pumpkin. I didn't leave the bread. Most of the pieces have pumpkin in them. So I'll go throw that in the mash. All right, pumpkin empanadas are in. Went ahead and added that too. And so now let's just mash this in. Do a good job in getting this all mixed in. So I'll do that for a while. All right, so went ahead and mashed in, finished up, and my temp I got it is 154, which is it's a little bit high. I like to be at 152, and so I'm at 153 now. It just went down. Reason being is the higher you go in temperature, above 152, the less amount of sugars, fermentable sugars, you're gonna get. So if you say you go 155 like I did, it's gonna tend to be a sweeter beer because there's gonna be more unfermentable sugar. Science, right? Anything below 152, and you will create more fermentable sugars, creating a drier beer. So that is temperatures. So I'm at 152, and that's exactly where I want to be. So I'll turn on my SS Brewing machine here to keep that temp, and we'll come back in when ready to mash up. All right, so it's time to sparge, and the way I sparge is I run the wort out into a pump, and then it goes up and then into this sparge arm. And so as you can see, the wort's kind of recycling on itself, and that's going to help create a really nice grain bed at the very bottom. And so, as you can see, I'll do that for about 10 minutes, and it'll be a nice clean wort. Alright, so I've went ahead and started my sparge process and collecting my wort. I just finished filtering, connected my hoses again. This is 168 degree water that I'm going to wash the grains off with. And so that's just coming from my HLT, goes down into my pump, back up into the sparge arm. So that's just dripping in there real slowly. And as you can see, I have my wort coming out, going into my other pump, into my boil kettle, and am collecting wort. I will collect 6.5 gallons and then boil for an hour for 5 gallons. So I'm going to go ahead and keep collecting until I get to 5.5 gallons. Alright, so collected 6.5 gallons. Started my burners and got a little bit of bubbling action going. When I get to a full boil, I'm going to go ahead and clock it at 60 minutes. At about 15 minutes out, I will add my other ingredients such as cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and vanilla. So, and if you take a look at that, the actual protein head buildup on that is orange. That's pretty cool. Now that is the boil I'm looking for. So I'm gonna let it boil like that. We'll go 60 minutes, and after those 60 minutes, we'll let it chill, and then get ready to pitch some yeast, make some beer. Alright, so boil's been going about 25 minutes out, and gonna go ahead and turn up the heat a little bit. Reason being is because I'm going to add my coil. So this is a 50-foot coil, and the reason why I'm adding it now is because I want to sterilize it. So see, I'm adding it so it immediately chilled the wort. So I wanted to turn that heat up to make sure I get to a boil back to boil. And as soon as I get back to a boil, I'm going to go ahead and add some spices. So this is my spice mix here, and that is 5 grams or 4 grams of cinnamon, 2 grams of nutmeg, and 1 gram of clove, and then there's a full vanilla bean in there as well. So that'll get thrown in as soon as I get back into a boil. Okay, so I added my spices back to a nice rolling boil, and now it's time to add lactose. So lactose is an unfermentable sugar, which basically means the yeast won't ferment it, so it's going to stay sweet. So in goes lactose, and then once that goes in, I only have about 20 minutes left, and I get to start chilling my wort. Okay, so I'm getting down to the wire here, about 10 minutes left, still got a boil going. If you could smell this wort, I wish they had smell-o-vision. It smells just like pumpkin pie. It really does. The clove, the vanilla with the cinnamon, the aromatics are just insane on this wort. I mean, it smells perfect. So I'm very happy with the way the wort turned out. I'm gonna have to get a gravity reading on it here soon. But here's my chilling system. Again, it's just recirculating with a sup pump. I recirculate cold water into that coil. It'll swirl around in the coil, chill the coil down, which will chill the wort, and then the hot water will go back into there, and essentially I'm not losing any water. So I'm just using ice. Usually about 4 blocks of ice will get me down to the temp, and since I'm using a really high temp, high tolerance yeast, I'm using a Kveik yeast called Loki. Anyway, since I'm using that yeast, I'll be able to get my pitch temp to, 80, 90 degrees, and I'll be good to go. So pretty excited about that. That should not take long at all. So I got about 10 minutes left, and I figured, since this is what I do beer reviews. I have a beer here from Mike at I Like Good Beer. This is Homemade is Best Indian Pale Ale. This is a Stickman beer. Stickman Brews out of Royalsford, Pennsylvania. I have had quite a few beers from these guys now because of Mike, and I love these beers. I love Stickman beers. They are one of the best breweries out there, in my opinion. I put them up there with the Tree Houses and all those of the world. In particular here, I think they're doing like probably one of the best beers I've had. So the beer comes in a really light halite color, super opaque, Very nice white head on that. Look at that, tight, compact bubbles. Let me get a dry-by aroma on it. And lo and behold, it smells like a Stickman beer. It's cake-like. There's a white cake, pineapple. There's some mango in that. Really sharp citrus. Smells fantastic. Let me get a taste on it. Cheers and thank you, Mike. God, that's so good. I mean, very soft, very pillowy. Mouth feels perfect. It is a well-executed IPA. There's no date code or ABV on there, but excellent beer. I really appreciate it, Mike. And this is a surprise beer review that I am doing. If you guys are watching this brewing video, then you get to see a beer review as well. Totally a beer. I give it a 95 all day long. I love Stickman beers. You know what? It's a Stickman. Just drink it. Thanks, Mike. Again, really appreciate it. I hope you guys like this really quick beer review. Alright, at this point, I'm pretty close to a pitching temperature. I've been chilling the wort. So as you can see, it's chilling. And so I have my temp probe here. I'm going to sanitize the end. Once you get close to pitching temperature, you want to sanitize everything that's going to actually touch the wort. Reason being, you can hear a beep here. Reason being is that once you get to pitching temperature or under 100 degrees, you can get a bunch of bacteria, get a bunch of nasties that will go in there and infect your beer. So you got to sanitize anything that's going to actually touch it. So I'm going to dip that in there. So you can see I'm at 91 degrees. And the Kveik yeast that I'm using will actually ferment up to 100 degrees, believe it or not. So I'm actually at a pitching temperature right now. I'm going to try to get it closer to like 80, 75, or in that area. Once I get to that area, I'll go ahead and pitch. So I'm going to just go ahead and keep chilling. As you can see, it's dropping as I'm filming. So I'll go ahead and keep on chilling it until I get closer to 80 degrees, and then I'll go ahead and transfer. Alright guys, so this is a very important step. It's time to transfer. So I am chilled down to a pitching temperature. As you can see, I already hooked up a very sanitized hose. I sanitized the entire ball valve, everything. Sanitized it all the way to my kettle here, which is completely sanitized. And I have an aerator at the end of that. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer. And when you see it comes out, it's going to come out and it's going to be aerating. What is aeration? Well, you had to charge oxygen into the wort. Why? I mean, the yeast need oxygen, okay? So this is the only time we'll ever want oxygen to be in our wort. So that's going in. Everything here is sanitized. I have my my blow off here, my valve, my one-way valve, and I have a piece called a tilt, which will tell me my gravity and everything else. That's Star San there, which is a sanitizer. It's an acid sanitizer, sanitizes everything, kills bacteria like crazy. So at this point, everything I do, completely sanitized, and very important that it stays sanitized. We don't want any nasties jumping into this beer right now. So even as I aerate and transfer, I definitely keep my lid as closed as possible because I don't want even air to hit this thing. I really don't. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep transferring, and then after this, we pitch. All right, guys, so the transfer is done. This is my fermenter. It also acts as a, you know, a refrigerator for some beer whenever I'm not fermenting. So I do have some beers in here, and don't worry, they are all big beers, imperial stouts, beers that can be aged, kept at 75. I'm gonna get this to 75 degrees eventually. And then after 75, I'll crash it again. So I have that, and I also have my keezer. So I have a keezer there with 4 taps. I put all the beer that I normally would store at refrigerator temp into the keezer, so no big deal. I do have my yeast. I do have the yeast here. So I do have my yeast. It is Imperial Loki. So Loki is actually a Kveik yeast, a Norwegian yeast. So the great thing about Loki is that it will actually ferment all the way to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is insane. I'll be going at 75, which is basically room temperature. So right now, this is a bucket of Star San. I'm sanitizing the entire package. Actually, I have some scissors in here as well, sanitizing those. Everything at this point has to be sanitized. If it's going to get near my wort, it has to be sanitized. I am calling it wort because it's wort until I pitch yeast. When the yeast start fermenting, it becomes beer. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start the process. We'll go ahead and trim this back just a hair, just enough to get my yeast in there. I will cut the package and then pitch my yeast. So can't do this with one hand, so I'm going to have to let you guys know that I did it. The yeast is in. So Loki is in, and we'll cover this back up. Completely sanitized. I'll button it up, and then this, in probably about 3 or 4 days, because Loki works fast, will be beer. I did hit my gravity. I hit 73, so actually it was a little bit above. So we're talking about probably a 7.1, 7.2% beer when this is done. I'm really excited to try it. If you guys are watching this, okay, here's the bonus. If you watch this through the whole thing, I do have a canning system. So I will get this beer and I will can this beer, and I'm going to actually enter this into a competition. So here's the thing. If you're watching this, if you want to try a can of this beer that I brewed, and you actually sat through this whole video to watch, I'll send you a beer. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram. It's at Brewery602 on Instagram. So follow me on Instagram and do a DM, direct message me, and say, I want to try this beer. So you have to say, I want to try this beer, and I will send you a beer. So I will send it to you. I will can it, send it to you. You try it, you review it, you let me know how it came out. It'll be a lot of fun to get the feedback, because that's why I do beer competitions, is because I want feedback. So I want to make sure I made a good beer. And the fact that you sat through this whole video and put up with me, you deserve it. So we'll share a beer together. How about that? Anyways, it's Marcus at Brewery602 on Instagram. Please follow, like, and subscribe. Cheers.